No, John should be in the first one. All right, fine.
Call you guys up. I can. What should I do with the mics? With that though? I put it over on my seat. Should I put it on someone else's seat too? The other one? Could everyone please grab their seats? We'll be starting in 45 seconds. Please take your seats, 45 seconds. Put down the cookies. "25 seconds. We will now be starting in 25 seconds. Okay, we have a good crowd here, so why don't we get started? It is 6 o'clock. My name is John Broadhead, and I am your host for tonight. And I think it's very important that you remember that word host, because I am the newest member of Sidewalk Toronto, and I'm on day 4. I think, originally when I got to Sidewalk on Monday, people were so nice to me. They're like, listen, we really want you to come to this public roundtable on Thursday. And I thought, that is so sweet. Inviting me to a public roundtable where I can sit and learn and even ask questions myself. And then I was told I have to host it. and people turned out to be slightly less nice than I originally thought. So we're going to get started, and we have a very action-packed evening. This is our second roundtable, which is important because I wasn't at the first. Okay, there's the "Hi, I'm John Broadhead" slide, just so you can check the spelling on your notes of my name. So the first roundtable was on March 20th, and was really the intro roundtable, went into the 8 pillars, talked about the vision. This one there's 4 roundtables over the course of the year. This one tonight is going to be a bit different, but let me quickly go over what we heard from the first one. And I'm using "we" a little bit loosely because, as you recall, I was not there. But some really good issues were raised: how public space is going to be used at Quayside, inclusive, quality, affordable housing, how do we look at the future of mobility and use this site as a test bed, and concern over privacy, information management, storage, and residency. So really easy issues. We figured we were done there. We just wrap it up. So instead, we decided to do Roundtable 2, and today is really the deep dive on 3 areas where we heard lots of critical questions, and we really need the feedback. As we work towards developing the plan, here are 3 areas that we want to dive into tonight and really get folks' views and ideas you have. One of them is responsible data use, the second is mobility, and the third is housing affordability. And just so you can see where this is going over the course of the year, then in late July, we're going to have another one. Beautiful summer. We may do it outside. I really apologize. Someone's going to get really mad at me for saying that. The person who has to organize it. I will not be the MC at the next one, apparently. And there we'll launch initial sketches on the planning and development work. And people will then get a chance to comment on something that's a little more baked, a little further along, and some of the content questions will have been answered and some proposals are ready to be discussed. And then as the leaves start to fall and the maple syrup starts to flow, we will have another one it's in the spring now? Oh, it's climate change. It used to be in the fall when I was young. Young in Ottawa. I don't know if anyone's been to Ottawa. The maple syrup flows in the fall. It's a government thing. And then we'll have the preliminary discussion of a draft plan in October, leading into, in the new year, hopefully a release of a plan, which will then go through all the various government processes and consultations. I was in the government for the 12 of the last 15 years, so I'm very familiar with those processes, and they're very thorough. So, land acknowledgement. I want to introduce Elder Gary Sue, who will come up and do a welcome and a land acknowledgement for us.
Bonjour. Ogashige higenen indijnakas. Magazine dodam. Mississauga and Dow. New Credit Dunji. Welcome to the treaty and traditional lands of the Mississaugas. And we acknowledge the all Indigenous people, both past and present, that inhabit this land. But we reserve the right that with only the Mississaugas were the treaties made. And so I always feel that sometimes they sort of like exclude us from the different things because they say, welcome to the Huron Wyandot, to the Haudenosaunee, to the Métis, and to the last people that were here, the Mississaugas. So being I'm here, welcome to our treaty lands. I looked at I'm thinking about this waterfront beautification, and I feel like the people that are here and have it in their hearts to change this, it's because they want to see a beautiful Toronto. And being that it's on our traditional land, I'm all for that. I'm all for things that are going to make air for the future generations of Toronto. Some of the cities that you visit and you go to, the only place that you can get any really good oxygen is like in their parks. Go to Central Park, go to right in the city of Mexico. You get good oxygen there because of all the trees. But Toronto, sometimes if you go down some of their streets, it's lacking in any kind of an oxygen, but the waterfront could provide that. It could make someplace beautiful. So keep on your good endeavors. This is a song that I sing. It's called a prophecy song because the song, what it says, it's welcoming all of the people of the world. And it was prophesied that this would happen at one time, and I don't ever think it would, but I sung at the G7, so I could understand that that prophecy is coming true. Ambe majanda Jibwani banda Abindagego anak wagingaba Abindagego anak wagingaba Ambe majanda Jibwani banda Abindagego anak wagingaba Abindagego anak wagingaba Ambe majanda Jibwani banda Abindagego anak wagingaba Abindagego anak wagingaba Ambe come Majanda, let's go over there. Jibwani banda, before we forget. Abindagego, anak wagingaba. Abindagego, anak wagingaba. For the doorway is open, the doorway to understanding. So whatever you want to do and everything that you want to accomplish, you can do it because you have the doorway of understanding to show them the way to go. Miigwech.
Whoop. Thank you, Elder Gary, for that. So, talking about what's the agenda for tonight, we're going to have a brief project update from two of the leads of Sidewalk Toronto. Then we're going to go into the deep dives with an expert on each of the three areas I discussed. We're going to do a couple of slides to prep for then an open Q&A at the end. And then, as you can see at the back, there's lots of roundtables, and that's where the even deeper dive discussion goes. And that afterwards, we will have experts, we will have volunteers, we will have lots of folks who will continue those discussions. So please, after the Q&A session, we invite you to go back to the roundtables and continue the conversation. So with that, I want to invite to the stage Meg Davis and Rit Agarwala. Meg is the Chief Development Officer of Waterfront Toronto, and Rit is the Head of Urban Systems for Sidewalk Labs.
Mic adjustment for the short girl. Thanks, John. So, good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many people came out on such a rainy night. Hopefully the weather will improve for the weekend. We met so many people at our last roundtable and heard so many important things from them about what they want to see with this project. And I want to assure you that you're going to see that reflected in the work that we've been doing since the last roundtable in March. John mentioned that there's a lot of local research going on. That includes a variety of ways that you all and others in Toronto can get involved. And the last time we outlined the engagement plan, all on the website, but the last 5 weeks have really brought that engagement plan to life. Last weekend, we had the first meeting of our 12 Sidewalk Fellows, and it's a really amazing program for these young folks. We wanted to hear from the next generation of talent in the city, and so we put out a call for 19 to 24-year-olds who would be interested in cities and technology. And there were over 660 applicants, really sort of showcasing the fact that Toronto is a hotspot for talent and for urban innovation. You know, it was difficult to select just 12 because they were all really terrific. But after this past weekend, we really know we got it right. They all come from different backgrounds and experiences, and really an impressive bunch, and you'll be hearing from them. They are traveling to 5 cities over the course of the summer, and they're working with an independent advisor, Professor Pamela Robinson from the Urban and Regional Planning School at Ryerson University. They will develop their own public report about their aspirations for Quayside. And then we held our first meeting of our residents' reference panel. This past winter, we put out a call for 20,000 randomly selected households, inviting people to volunteer 5 Saturdays over the next little while to really dig deep into some of the issues that we're facing with this project. Over 400 people volunteered, and they were randomly selected. There were 36 of them, and they matched Toronto's demographics, and they spent the weekend with us last weekend, and they're doing so again this weekend. And like the fellows, they're producing their own report, but in particular, we just want to be cognizant of the fact that they've really stepped up to volunteer their own time to do this with us. We've also met with a number of neighborhood associations. These are really important conversations because these are the folks who live in and around the Quayside area, and we want to get specific in our conversations with them. So we've met with the West Donlands Committee, the York Quay Neighborhood Association, the St. Lawrence Community Association, and we have other meetings planned. And if any of you represent an organization or a neighborhood association and you'd like to come in and talk with us, please go to hello@sidewalktoronto.ca and we can arrange that. And we've also held our first meetings with our external advisor working groups. So we have 8 work streams, and we have an advisor working group for each one of these, and we wanted support from experts within the City of Toronto to help us with this. So there are more than 80 people who've agreed to serve on these working groups, and they'll meet throughout the summer and into the fall. It's important to note that they're volunteers, and their organizations don't necessarily endorse the project. They're really helping us to use their experience and think more broadly about our project. So they will not be necessarily endorsing. They don't own the actual report themselves, but they are helping us along the way. And we've done a series of videos. It explains more about the 8 work streams that we're working on, and we'll bring you up to speed on some of that content. They can be found on the Sidewalk Toronto Facebook and YouTube channels. But we're going to take a look at one. It's the mobility pillar, and we have Pina and Willa talking about People First Streets.
A great city needs all types of transportation options that are affordable, safe, and convenient for everyone who uses our streets, whether that's pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, or drivers. That's why, at Quayside, we're exploring a bunch of different mobility solutions so that we can finally start to build our cities around people. Here to talk about what that looks like are 2 of my favorite urbanists, Willa and Pina.
Hi. I've spent my career thinking about how to make a really great Toronto. And it's about putting in, really great infrastructure like solid cycling commuter routes and a solid transit line that's dependable and fully accessible.
The number one priority for me is actually for the site to feel connected to the city of Toronto. And then one of the things that we're going to be really interested in is providing the infrastructure, the paths that will actually connect Toronto to the site for cyclists. But also, the streetcar network, the subway network are things that we really need to be able to link to in order for it to become part of the Greater Toronto Area.
So amping up our existing transit systems is really important, but it won't be enough if people don't feel safe on our city streets. One way we can start to address this is through adaptive traffic lights, a concept I know Willa is really passionate about.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about traffic lights a lot over my career. Let's say that you're an elderly person and you're looking to cross the street. What an adaptive traffic light could do is detect how fast you're moving, and then in real time decide, I'm going to hold the cars until this person has safely made it across.
Another solution we might explore is using autonomous vehicles as a kind of shared fleet or shuttle service. And once they're proven to be a safe and reliable technology, shared AVs could totally change the way we use our public spaces.
The reason why cars park is because we drive our car and no one else is going to touch it for the next hour. But in theory, the success will be when we don't actually own our own personal vehicle, and therefore there is no need for that car to be parked somewhere because someone else is using it.
If we can do away with the need for so much street parking, then we can free up a ton of room for people. Suddenly, our streets start looking more like sidewalks, and our sidewalks start looking like public plazas.
It's a pretty good trade-off.
These are just some of the ideas we're exploring to try to make our waterfront, starting with Quayside, a place filled with safe, fast, and accessible alternatives to car ownership. But all of this is just daydreams until we hear from our fellow Torontonians to find out what ideas inspire them and what solutions they want to see.
I had a little song that I thought of. You want to hear it? Ain't no party like a traffic light party, because a traffic light party tells you when to stop for the safe and efficient operation of an intersection. Yeah?
Okay, with that, I'm passing it over to Rit. Take it away.
Thank you, Meg. And since Willa could not be here, she's attending a friend's wedding tonight, this will be the end of the rap portion of the evening, so I am unqualified. So quickly to run through, there we go. As Meg suggested, we've had a productive 5 weeks and a handful of other things that I wanted to add to give you an update on some of the work that's been going on. First of all, we've heard, of course, from the people who were at our last public engagement, of course, others in our many interactions with the public here in Toronto, that the question of responsible data use in a highly tech-enabled neighborhood is of top priority. We understand that. It's actually something we've always taken as very serious. It's been heightened in our awareness over the course of this process. And last week we released a responsible data use policy framework. Now, a lot of qualifications there, policy framework, because it is just a framework. It is just the starting point for a conversation on how one would develop the right kinds of policies, the right kinds of approaches to manage data use in a way that we can get the benefits that data can offer the urban environment while mitigating and preventing against the negative consequences of the storage of too much data or of personally identifiable information in an irresponsible way. This is very much the first cut. Later on, my colleagues Elisa and Christina are going to come up and talk about it, and it is one of the 3 topics that we're looking very much for your input on tonight because it was so prominent in the conversations at our last public event. I am pleased to to announce, I guess, that next month we are on schedule to open what will be Sidewalk Toronto's physical office presence on Quayside at 307 Lakeshore Boulevard. It's going to be a fantastic space, a space where the joint Sidewalk and Waterfront Toronto teams are going to do a lot of the work on this project for the rest of the year. But it also is intended to be a very welcoming place, a place where we'll be able to share some exhibits, tell you a bit about the work that's going on. There may be visuals and other ways to engage with what we are working on. It's been designed by 2 award-winning Canadian firms based, I believe, here in Toronto, Labelle and Boulian and Daily Tous les Jours, and we're very excited about the work that they've been doing. We're also working on the public space that surrounds 307 Lakeshore with the intent of making it someplace that well into the fall and even into the winter could be enjoyable and accessible to the public outdoors. And to do that, we are working closely on what we consider a weather mitigation strategy to ameliorate the extremes of the wind and rain on that site with 2 other Canadian firms, Partisans and RWDI. We're very excited about that. We've also heard, and this was a significant topic of conversation at our last public event as well, the need for accessibility. Accessibility broadly defined, people with all sorts of disabilities or other constraints on how they interact, how they get around. And to ensure that we really are at the cutting edge of thinking about how that set of needs gets integrated into our design and into the technologies that we envision. For Quayside, we've launched a partnership with the Canadian Institute for the Blind and OCAD University that are going to explicitly look at the question of design in the public realm to ensure accessibility for all people. We've also, and the last 2 things I'll talk about, are the fact that we've launched 2 studies that relate directly to our ambitious sustainability goals for this site. We're not going to talk much about sustainability the rest of this evening. It has certainly not receded from our attention. The first one is partnering with 2 Toronto-based consulting firms to do a detailed study of building energy use. One of the things that we know is that many buildings, it's true here in Toronto, it's true all over the world, that are designed with the best of intentions to be highly efficient green buildings do not perform that well when they are in fact occupied. And what we are trying to do in partnership with these firms and with coordination of others who create policy here is understand how those designs correlate to the actual energy consumption with a view towards incorporating what really addresses energy addresses energy efficiency into our designs for Quayside. And related to that, of course, is a study we've launched also with 2 Canadian-based companies focused on district energy and one national lab, where we're going to be exploring several new technologies for providing thermal and cooling around the district, which taken together, of course, are 2 of the important strategies, these extremely low-load buildings that are dependable and the provision of district heating and cooling in a novel, even better way, are critical to our overall ambition to make Quayside, and perhaps requiring a bit more scale, its surround, in fact, get towards that objective of climate positive. And with that, I'd like to invite, there he is, Craig Neville Manning, Sidewalk Lab's head of engineering, to talk about 2 of our technology demos.
Thanks, Rit. I'll take the clicker. Thank you. Pass the bit on. Hi, I'm Samara and Ryan. I'm the head of engineering at Sidewalk Labs, and the engineering team here thinks about how digital technology, both software and hardware can make quality of life better. So we're thinking through a whole bunch of ideas, but because in addition to liking thinking, we also like building things and doing. We've built a couple of things that we thought would be fun to share with Toronto. And so some of you may see, who's actually visited Old Toronto, the site that we released about 5? That's great, wow, about half of you. So the rest of you, this is essentially taking tens of thousands of photos from the Toronto archives that have descriptions on them but haven't been mapped, and automatically mapping them with a number of algorithms we've developed. And so you can sort of look at a neighborhood and see back the last 100, 150 years what was really going on there in terms of some of the historical photographs. And so since about 5 weeks ago when we launched this, we've had about 2 million page views, 70,000 unique users, and then we've also released the actual code that we wrote, the open source, into the public domain for other people to take and use and modify and improve and so on. The other thing we've done is the actual data, the latitudes and longitudes that we associated with each photo. We've given that back to the archive so they can use that for other reasons as well, and also made that available so that anybody in the public can build on top of that data. Incidentally, because algorithms are not always perfect, you might find the odd photo that's in the wrong place. It's essentially looking at the text and trying to figure out from that where it should be. And so we've provided a way for you to say, actually, this photo should be located over there, and we'll take that data into account and update the database with that. So feel free to kind of make us corrections as you look at that site. For example, if we look around right where we are here and zoom in, there's a photo of a house that used to be right on this corner. And so you can see this photo was taken in 1949, learn more about that, and sort of browse around. It's a lot of fun. So recently, we've just made a big improvement to this, and so Ryan Willem, who's on the engineering team, actually went to school here at U of T, is going to tell us a bit more about that.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Yeah, so we found out that the Center for Geospatial Intelligence, there we go. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh, that's what I need to do. All right, so we found out. It doesn't work this way. The Center for Geospatial Intelligence, as part of the City of Toronto, has been taking photos every couple years for the past, since 1940, from the air of Toronto. They really cover all of Toronto. They're not super accessible now, but we thought it'd be really, really cool if you put these on a map and you could kind of go back and forward in time. And this could provide a really, really interesting way of looking at our city. And so that's actually what we did. We wrote a machine learning model to automatically stitch these into a map. And we're actually releasing that tonight. We have a demo in the lobby. The coolest thing that came out of it for me is I was actually flipping through Old Toronto, and I found in the middle of Trinity Bellwoods Park, there was this enormous building. And I've been to Trinity Bellwoods Park a lot, and there was no enormous building in the middle of Trinity Bellwoods Park. And so I was wondering, is this actually on the map? And so I went to, there it is. This is Trinity Bellwoods Park as it looked in 1947. And you can see that there's a building in the middle of Trinity Bellwoods Park. As it turns out, this is Trinity College that's now part of the University of Toronto. It lived in the center of Trinity Bellwoods Park until about 1953 when they knocked it down. If you go to Old Toronto, you can actually see up-close pictures of this. Oh my. Why do I keep doing that? You can actually see up-close pictures of this, and this is what it used to look like. It looks a lot like Trinity College now, actually. Here's another picture. This is taken from Queen Street, and I know you all recognize something in this photo. Those gates are still there. This is a photo taken today from the exact same place, and the gates have just been painted white, but there's no building in the background. So this is a really, really interesting way of looking at the city. Oh no. This is a really, really interesting way of looking at the city. We're demoing it out front, and if you guys are interested in learning more about Old TO, one of our senior software engineers, Dan Vanderkam, is talking at Civic Tech TO on Tuesday, May 8th, and so you should really check it out. So I'll give it back to Craig.
Great, thank you. And Ryan really is one of the smartest technical people in the world, and yet it still is kind of challenging. So I'd next like to introduce Samara Trilling, who's on our engineering team and has been thinking a lot about mobility in Toronto and understanding the various modes of getting around, and has built a tool to essentially look at that. So Samara?
Thanks so much. Yeah, see if I can handle this. Great. So, yeah, my name is Samara Trilling. I'm a software engineer also. with Ryan on Craig's team. And last time at the last roundtable, one of the apps that we demoed is called the Toronto Transit Explorer. Anybody else see that when they were at the last roundtable? I know a couple. Great, awesome. So that was something that we got a really awesome amount of feedback on and talked to a lot of people. It shows you how long it takes to get anywhere in the city from, you can see that, that initial point right there, and it colors the map according to how long it takes you to get everywhere in the city via walking, biking, or on transit. You can actually compare the different modes of transit as you get around the city. So after talking with everyone, we added a couple of features. You now have the ability to bike share, which is something that we just added. And you can bike share to transit, which is a multimodal feature that we added. We improved a couple of other ones, like the ability to study end-to-end accessible transit routes via wheelchair. And we're still refining the tool, but we are launching it today. It's available at totx.sidewalklabs.com. And still in beta, so please do give us some feedback. There's a feedback link on there, and we are also open sourcing it, so we hope that people will build some really fantastic things on top of it. Please check us out in the lobby. We've got a demo going, and would love to tell you more about it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Oh, I'm gonna need that clicker. So it was a really fun week for me in another way, which I'd just like to share because I'm an oversharer. I was like the least technologically savvy person in the government of Canada. And now I work with people like that. And it's, I'm learning a lot. I learned what a Bitmoji is. So I spent like about 45 minutes the other night trying to figure out how that works. So moving on, enough about me. So now we're going into the deep dive session. So we're going to start with responsible data use. And in order to walk us through that, but just so you know, we're going to go through all three of them, and then we're going to go to open questions. So don't ask open questions. So we're going to turn this over first to Elisa and Christina from Waterfront Toronto and from Sidewalk Labs, who are the lead on this area. Welcome to the stage. Christina, should we start at you?
Afraid of the clicker.
Want me to drive?
All right, so Christina and I were here the last time, and we might be taking our show on the road soon, because this is a fun topic. And one of the reasons why it's so fun is because it's new, it's novel. One of the things that we've learned is that in order for people to want to come to this district, to want to live here, work here, we need to have not just a good, but a great privacy and data use policy. And one of the reasons that we released our framework is because we are striving to get there. And without it, we understand this is a place that's not going to be successful. The reason why I say it's exciting is because there's no template. There's no world out there or city out there or district that said, we know how to do this, just apply it here and it's going to work. We are literally building this together along with you guys to make it work the best for you. And so I think that's a great opportunity for Toronto, and I think that's a great opportunity for this project. So that's why I'm excited by it.
And there's a really strong reality in the fact that cities and the businesses that operate in cities have long been actually collecting data in different ways, whether that be in cameras or the way that you're traveling through stores and how you're actually visiting spaces. And a lot of that's been done in the vacuum of actually having a conversation about these core issues. There's many people in this room that have been part of this dialogue around smart cities for almost a decade, and we know that these are very important policy type discussions that haven't quite happened, and this project is a really exciting opportunity for actually to bring these concepts to the ground and have a very, very real set of examples for us to work through these very complicated challenges on. And the public dialogue that we're about to engage on, and we've started to engage through the responsible data use framework, is something that we look very forward to actually being able to learn from our context and then share that into other jurisdictions as well.
See, I told you I was afraid of this. What did I just do? Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's get on to the principles. There are a lot of words up here. And That doesn't take away from, and I hope you guys will be able to sort of digest them, but I'm just going to give you an overview of what's going on with our responsible data use framework. So we released it on Tuesday. And as Rich said, this is a beginning. It's not nearly at all an end. And the purpose of the framework was to give us the ability to come up with some principles by which we would be able to guide decisions that need to be made in Sidewalk Toronto on things like data use, on things like open data, on privacy, on things like data storage. And so we had to sit back and say, what do we think are the foundational things that we need to have in place in order to help us make better decisions, so that when we're using, processing, storing, securing, sharing data, if it needs to even be collected in this district, what's the best way to do it? And so I'm going to take you kind of quickly through these principles, but I know we have handouts, and we do have it posted online now for people to digest. So the first piece that we focused on was making sure that any data that gets collected, used, and shared here is tightly connected to the benefit that the data collection is intended to provide. So we're not just here to amass data and information for the sake of having data and information. That's never been Sidewalk's goal, and that's what we talk about. And the way that we're going to ensure that that remains a cornerstone of our project is to have that tight coupling. So that's our guideline principle. When we have a project, we're going to look, how is it connected? How is it connected and how is it benefiting? And if we cannot make that connection, then that's not something we should be using. The second thing that we need to do is be transparent. And I'm talking transparency not in the way that sometimes you have transparency like privacy policies that nobody reads, that people click through and you ignore. This is like talking in language and putting people in postings that real people can read and understand and digest. And that's going to be critical and key because there's going to be a lot going on, and we understand that we need to understand how people are going to use our data. This is the community's information. And so you need to understand and be able to have control over that. And you can only do that if things are transparent. So that's why it's such an important principle for us. The next one that's important is openness. We think that the community will be stronger only if we have the benefit of multiple voices and people helping with the development. And so that's why being open and accessible is critically important. And to the extent that we can, making sure that we are protecting personal privacy, we're going to strive to make things open. We talked about just now, Old TO, open source. Toronto Transit Explorer, open source. That is going to be a key element of any of our product and in decisions is, does it make sense to open source it? And importantly, is that something that we can contribute to the city's open data catalogs so that more people can use it, including the public? The next thing that's critically important, and one of the things that we're doing here tonight is engagement. There is a lot of complexity going on here, a lot of thoughts about what is possible and could be done, and we need that support. And we understand that we need to listen and we need to learn. I know that since we started this project, working with Waterfront Toronto and our advisors, I've learned a ton, and there's a lot more that can be done. So that's why it's critically important that we proactively engage the community, because it, in the end, makes us better. The next thing that we need to do, which is tied to that, is gain community trust. It goes to the first thing that I said. If people feel as if they're being surveilled, that this is not a comfortable community, that your individual rights when you come and live here and work here are not being protected, this is not going to succeed. We need to earn that trust. It does not come, and we're going to earn it. And then the last thing, which ties it all together for me and for this project and for us, is keeping people first. What we do here has to matter, has to convert that benefit to the people. And that's front and center. And we don't want to lose sight of that. And so with these principles in mind, we're going to be able, we believe, to make better decisions in the long run that at the end of the day will lead us to a privacy-sensitive result and end up having us have a responsible use of data and not just one that doesn't have checks and balances to it.
So in addition to these main principles, we've looked at these issues with the various working groups and the public feedback, and we've determined that the responsible data use policy should have 4 key areas that we're going to organize our work streams around. The first is privacy, which relates to how the individuals have control over how their personal information is collected, used, and shared, both in private and public spaces. Data stewardship, which is about the use, control, ownership, storage, and routing of data. Access to data, which deals with questions of how broadly and on what terms data will be made available. And data security, about protecting data and maintaining and minimizing the potential for breaches. So these are the 4 main areas that we will continue to have these discussions through and being able to organize the information that we're sharing back.
And so far, we feel as if, based on the communications that we've had and that the advice and guidance that we've gotten from our panelists and from people who are experts thus far, that we are probably furthest along in terms of being able to make commitments in the area of privacy. And so I don't want to highlight all of them, but I do want to focus on a couple. And one in particular, I want to make sure that we're making clear what we mean by it, because we don't want to get lost in jargon. So privacy by design. We keep saying, we're going to do privacy by design, and what does that actually mean? And what it means for this project is that we are going to have privacy considerations that are based on and applying the principles that we laid out from the beginning of the project through its design, through its implementation, and even as we go on and iterate on it. It doesn't stop, well, one, it doesn't start when you've already finished and you're like, oh wow, we have data, now what do we do? It starts at the beginning with that first question. And let me give you an example of what we mean by that. And I didn't realize that Willa's video was gonna show, but Willa talked about adaptable traffic lights. And if you can imagine that scenario where you have sensors and you have cameras, there's the potential for collecting information, images of people. And so the first thing that we would do with that project isn't make the assumption that we're going to collect people, images, and it's going to be stored forever. We first start with do we need to collect that data and information? That's privacy by design. You start asking the question, what is that project trying to do? Pedestrian safety. Is actually having an image necessary for you to have pedestrian safety? I don't actually need the image. Is the answer. No, I don't need to know who that individual is. What I need to know, and if you saw sort of Willa's outline, I don't know if you remember, it was sort of a sketch of a thing that was kind of a person, but it didn't say, you can tell who that was or anything about them. But that's the information that the adaptive light needed to know to get there. So what do? In a privacy by design world, you say, I'm gonna, make software, an algorithm that gets rid of that identifiable information. You de-identify it, so you don't have that person's information. And then you even say, and to the extent that we have raw images, I'm going to figure out the quickest way I can get rid of that, because I don't need that. And where do I store it? Maybe locally on the box, so that it doesn't have to be transferred outside. That's privacy by design. And we want to apply that to each project that we have, so we make those decisions going as we go. And so I don't know if we need to highlight others, but we thought that that would be a good one to show how we're trying to apply these principles to real-life situations.
As we continue to engage the advisory groups and the public, we anticipate that we will be making more commitments over time, and certainly in the Master Innovation and Development Plan. Please know that it's not lost on us that we have not made commitments to date on certain other areas, particularly with regards to data storage, location, data routing, and access to data. The simple truth is that our work in these areas remains early on in the development, and we need further consultation with our expert advisory groups and Waterfront Toronto's newly formed Digital Strategy Advisory Panel, and you, the public. And that's where we hope to get to tonight. To start the conversation off, we do have 5 general questions for you this evening. And somehow, I didn't realize the questions weren't coming up. Oh, there they are. We have 5 questions for you this evening. Are the principles appropriate for this project? Are there others that we should be considering? Are our commitments appropriate and sufficient? Does the decision-making framework enable us to strike a good balance between enabling innovation and safeguarding privacy? Which elements of the framework are most important to you? And what outstanding concerns should we work to address? We look forward to hearing your thoughts in a short while around the round tables.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move very quickly to Rit on mobility.
Thank you. Let's see, the notorious clicker here. So, in many ways, like many other great cities in North America, Toronto, from a mobility perspective, presents a paradox. This is, in fact, a highly transit-dependent, highly walkable city, in which, surprisingly, in the year 2018, in a wealthy country, 40% of all trips are made without the use of a private automobile. And yet, of course, it's still a highly auto-oriented city, where 77% of Toronto households own a car. And to a certain extent, a lot of what we would want to do to think about how to design Quayside to be more focused on those people-first streets, more transit-oriented, less complicated by the presence of vehicles, requires us to explore this paradox, because it's also not going to work if we are draconian and we are not thinking about how people will actually use the site. Well, I talked last time about our 6 points in our mobility approach around extending the transit backbone, building streets for people, improving pedestrian and cycling comfort with technology, encouraging the use of shared self-driving vehicles that are eventually electric powered, creating a neighborhood delivery system to reduce the number of vans and other trucks on our streets, and along the lines of what Willa talked about in the video, using technology to optimize the network for all users with real-time data, with analysis, and potentially with pricing. And so the questions at the tables that are going to focus on mobility that we want to ask, the first are really a set of questions around how you use the city. What is your primary mode of transportation when you go around your daily life here in this city? Do you own a car? If so, why? What is it that you use it for? What things would have to change if you were going to give up your car? And if you don't own a car, are there pain points? Are there things that don't work for you currently about how the transit system, the sidewalk network, the bike network, et cetera, are designed? And then we move to Quayside, and then this is where we want your feedback, your input, in fact, not just feedback, because we haven't said much yet. But in a neighborhood that's as close to downtown as Quayside, how far do you think we can go? How far do you think we should go in terms of designing out private cars, designing in walkability? What do we do with parking? Do you have it? Do you not have it? What would you recommend we do? And what are the benefits and downsides of those decisions, whichever way they get to be made? And then finally, a question about this technology of the self-driving vehicle. As I said last time, I'm an enthusiast. I think it will change the way cities work for the better. But there's a lot of work to get there, both in terms of the technology development and in terms of the policy and planning framework in which they are used. But we'd like your input. We'd like you to tell us, what do you think about this technology? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? How do you think self-driving cars and vans and other self-driving vehicles ought to be used in Toronto?
Thank you, Rit. And for our last deep dive, Joe Greenbaum, our head of affordable housing.
Thanks so much, John. I would love that. Thank you. So I'm going to fly quickly so that we can get to questions, which is, I know, why, and our roundtables, which is why you guys are all here tonight. Housing is, fundamental to every city and to every community. We want Quayside to be a welcoming, inviting, and inclusive place for people to live, work, and play, 18 hours a day. We don't want Quayside to be an elite enclave for a select few. And if we create a community and a neighborhood that ultimately looks like that, we will have failed. This is a graphic that some of you may be familiar with. It reflects a U of T prof's work on the 3 cities of Toronto. And it demonstrates that, over the last 40 years, income inequality in Toronto, as in many tier 1 successful cities, has really increased. And we're hoping to pilot some solutions and demonstrate in the testbed of Quayside that there are potentially ways to combat this income inequality. So just to give you guys some quick facts that I think will be helpful fuel for our roundtable discussions to come. Over the next decade, 484,000 approximately seniors will be looking to right-size and downsize from single-family homes in places where they've raised their families, while at the same time today, 47% of young adults ages 20 to 34 live with their parents in the GTA. So we clearly have a demand and supply issue in terms of the kinds of typologies and the housing stock that is available in the city. And sort of importantly, I think over the last 10 years, this city, like many cities, has seen a lot of construction and a lot of development. There's cranes all over town. Importantly, of those more than 100,000 units that have been built, only 2,400 of them are purpose-built rentals. So it's not just the typologies and the kinds of things that we're building, but it's also the tenures and the ways that people can have access to those new housing units that are coming online. Oops. I guess that I'm in the same boat as everybody else. We're looking at a bunch of different working on a bunch of different policies and also innovations in terms of construction material, construction methodology, whether or not we introduce manufacturing into the more traditional forms of construction to get things built quicker and ideally cheaper, and then be able to pass that savings along. I would importantly like to call out these four questions, which will be back at the roundtables and be the starting point for the conversation around housing tonight. So, and our team is really excited to hear what you guys have to say and what input you have to bring to these four, and the many other topics I'm sure will come up in the conversation. Number one, Sidewalk Toronto believes that complete communities must be affordable to people with a range of incomes. How important is the mix of income at the building level and at the neighborhood level? What factors make an apartment appealing to you? And what factors make owning a home or a condo appealing? Like are there other opportunities on the 10-year spectrum between rental and home ownership? How do you feel about living in a building that also contains a wide mix of uses, such as retail or office space or even light manufacturing? What are the shared amenities in a building, block, or neighborhood that would make you feel more comfortable living in smaller space that would be a lower cost for your home? How can these homes still address the needs of growing families, which we know is an issue throughout the GTA? So we're really excited to hear what everyone has to say, and I will hop off stage so we can get to the fun part. Here you go.
You're staying up here to answer questions, because I am not answering any questions because I don't know the answers. So maybe if I can get Elisa and Christina back up. We're going to do 15 minutes of questions. We do have folks with microphones over there. If you thought I was just sweating excessively because of my nerves, it's actually the lights are really bright. The other runner is there. So please raise your hand if you have a question. And I know when you're trying to give a speech and not ask a question, because I know. So questions, because I do it myself. Okay, we have one there, right in the middle. I see you. The runners are walking. And, I mean, who am I kidding? I'm doing nothing over here. Yes.
Hi, thank you guys so much. My name's Celia, and my question is, you guys, Sidewalk Toronto, have been doing a really good job of getting input from the community, in the sense that you're doing a good job of getting the community to come to you, as we are right now. I'm wondering if you're doing anything to go to the community members yourselves, to reach out to people who might not be here today, but who might also have very valuable input on some of these very important issues that we're talking about today.
Great question. Rit, I'm going to give this one to you first.
All right, sure. So I think we are. There's no doubt the opportunity always to reach out to more. I think the representative panel of Torontonians is certainly one way where all of these mailings were sent out. to get a statistically representative sample of the entire city. And so that's one way, because we do know that the kind of people who have the ability and the interest to come to a meeting like this may or may not be really representative of the city as a whole. I think that's one. Our advisory groups, in fact, we are asking them to connect us at various points. Now, those are necessarily tilted towards people who have specific subject matter expertise rather than the general public. But then I also think some of those studies, for example, the one we are doing with OCADU and the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, part of what's going to be necessary to make those projects work is to do, whether it's a design shred, whether it is consumer research. We've recently done a project, our colleague Jesse, who's here somewhere, can talk about, of doing user research, going out onto Queens Quay and into other places in Toronto to ask people on the street, just finding them going about their daily lives, and ask them, how are you using this space? What is it that drives the way you use it? What constrains you, and what would you like to see more of? Is this enough? Is it all we could possibly do? Of course not, but I do think there is a complementary set of engagement that is not just this kind of come to us, as you put it, but us also going out to the rest of the city.
Yeah, if I can just, is that on? Oh, there, you have to talk right. It's like a rock star microphone. You have to be really close. There are also a couple other things that we're doing. There's some pop-ups that will happen around the city when the weather gets a little bit better, not just in the waterfront. So we want to reach beyond the waterfront boundaries. There'll be some design jams, which is not a word I had heard of before, but these are really charrettes, which is the old word, and a variety of. So there are opportunities that we are providing that are beyond the waterfront and beyond having everybody come here.
Okay, next question. There we are.
Hi. I'd like to ask a question about data and privacy, because you're talking in the context of now, with Facebook answering questions. These are huge problems. If we have a different kind of government, or if we're in a place called a sanctuary city sometime in the future, and we do jail people before we try to deport them in this country. So things could get a lot worse, and data sharing of people living in a neighborhood more and more could be very, very dangerous for everybody. Everybody. So what I'd like to see is for Google, Alphabet, Sidewalk Lab, I'd like to see you be less afraid of using good language, appropriate, transparent language. I was an English teacher, so I know when argumentation can be presented with qualified statements, somewhat weasel words, marketing words. Even sidewalk is a good marketing word because it's not threatening. Okay? So you've got to get down and do more than just present best case scenario, like wanting to see the senior cross the sidewalk safely. Give your second scenario being something very much more problematic that will address serious issues about privacy and the data collection, the use of data, the selling of data, but particularly the use of data. We're not that long from very totalitarian regimes, and we have a neighbor to the south that seems to be becoming so, and I'm not exaggerating, but with this incredible Google, Facebook, digital world, we are, in possibly deep trouble. Okay.
Thank you very much. And what you're saying is what makes us know that this is not only an incredibly important issue for this district, but is something that needs to be addressed on a really serious worldwide basis. And we think that the framework for that starts tonight with getting the engagement going. You might have noticed that for data use or stewardship, as we call it, we didn't put down specific commitments, and not because we don't care about it, it's because we care so much and we know that there are complex questions that need to be answered. And so the things that you're thinking about are the things that we're thinking about, and we want to use the opportunity to get it right.
If I can just add to that actually too. I've mentioned the Waterfront Toronto Digital Strategy Advisory Panel, which is arm's length from this process. And if you've seen the announcement or not yet, you'll notice that there's some of the most critical thinkers in the Canadian space, academics, industry folks, practitioners across the space that are looking at these things not just from an optimistic, utopianistic output. They're looking at these from very deep-rooted ethical basis as well. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge function about all of our optimistic and rose-colored kind of glasses that sometimes we bring to a project that has this type of opportunity to it, to make sure we are thinking about worst possible case scenarios, challenging us, pushing back, making sure that we're looking at those alternative outcomes and being very thoughtful about what we move forward. So there's both the project team that's very dedicated to the best possible outcome, but also a due diligence challenge function that Waterfront Toronto has also put in place through its digital strategy advisory panel.
Thank you. I would like to be one of those people to challenge you, if you don't mind. If somebody were able to come to you and say, I can create a truly affordable housing that is not government sponsored, okay? I can build houses on Toronto waterfront, okay, for $350,000 a unit, and compare that to the norm. I can also build rental housing. I can reduce CO2, I can repurpose increased methane gas, and on top of all that, I can deliver over 2 million pounds of fresh greens and vegetables that will be harvested and delivered the same day. And I can do all of that by taking virtually no land. Would you listen to me? Could I present that in a manner where it would intrigue you enough to actually have you say, no, 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 we don't want to do that, go away?
I think the answer is yes. I want to hear more.
Yeah,
I don't know about anybody else, but I'm quite interested. Joe.
Joe, would you?
Joe?
Sure, we'd love to hear more.
Just so you know, I was turned down, and I was told, no, we don't want you to present that idea. We don't want to consider it. I was flabbergasted because it had the support of the National Science Foundation in the US, it had the support of 3 different universities, and yet they didn't even want to hear it. So I would love to talk to Joel. I would beg to talk to Joel. Thank you. I will come begging back of the room.
And I'll come give you my card.
Excellent. At the front here. Whoa, that's a lot of hands.
Yeah, hi, my name's Todd. This is another sort of data privacy question. This might be a quick and easy one to kind of answer, but I was wondering if you'd given much thought to, with regard to your framework, and particularly, I guess, the open and transparent data portions. I wonder if have you thought about who would make the decision about the level of openness or transparency? It seems like a scenario where sort of a multi-stakeholder group of some kind with representatives from Sidewalk Labs, but also some outside, might create a lot of confidence, or more confidence, I guess, in that, rather than if it was decided internally and then kind of the back-end logic as to why it was kind of opaque. So I just wondered if you thought about that.
Yes, and have you been in our rooms with our advisors and our company and Waterfront where we've said, how can we do this differently so that we can engender that trust? One of the things that we talked about or thinking about, and you'll see it in the questions, is this concept of a data trust and what that envisions or imagines and that we think is worth exploring is such a thing like you just said. If there is some other sort of body, group of people, independent, who should be deciding how certain data and information that's collected in this district is used. So right on, hope you're back there to talk more with us about it, because it's spot on the things we're talking about. Yes.
Yes, I think you have the microphone there.
Hi, so I appreciate all the thought and commitments you're making regarding affordable housing and a mix of people who can live in the area. In terms of the commercial side, however, if you look at the average condo development in Toronto, you get a Starbucks, a bank, a Shoppers, and if you're getting really crazy and independent, a dentist. So the question is, to what extent, if any, is there consideration for mandating or encouraging or just any policies towards getting independent retailers in, so it's not just people who can live there, but also people who can start a business, own their own thing, and make a living, not just live.
The answer is yes. We are definitely thinking about that, and I mean, for all the reasons that you state, and then to build upon them, you know, one of the most important parts of the work that we're doing here is to create a vibrant community, whether that be on the street is the first place, within the buildings, and as you move up and around them. It is incredibly important to us that this be an exciting place to come, that it be dynamic, that there be you know, entrepreneurs who are able to open small shops. You, of course, need your daily bread and other sort of neighborhood conveniences. It is a ground floor strategy that is vibrant and porous between the inside and the outside, is something that we are totally focused on and working towards as to co-create as a group between our two organizations.
I'm going to give you two examples of where we've done this already, and we're going to be improving upon what we've done in the past with our partners. In the West Don Lands, we had a requirement in the proposals for the Pan Am Athletes Village for the developers to bring a ground floor retail animation strategy, and the winning proponent, as you probably know, is Dundee Kilmer. They also look after the distillery district, and they brought an amazing retail strategy, and you can see it coming to fruition in the West Don Lands. They've got such a great mix of local entrepreneurs in the West Don Lands. And then in the East Bay front, we have an ground floor animation strategy with our Bayside project, where we require the developer to pool all of the space, all of the ground floor space, and treat it as if it were a curated, I don't want to say mall because it's not a mall, but to look at the space holistically. So you don't have two dry cleaners beside one another. In fact, we told them they could only have one nail salon in the entire district. So we are very conscious of the animation at the ground floor. It's so important to making a great place. And with Sidewalk's help, we're going to improve on that as we go forward in Quayside.
Okay, last question, and then we will continue. We'll have team members back at the back around the tables, and then we do a second showing. That's why we have to end on time. So last question.
Hi, this question is, I guess, aimed at Rit, if that's possible for you to answer it. We're talking about data as if it's a side effect that we need to be concerned about, but I'm really curious about the ambition to monetize data. And if I've seen a video with you in it talking about some ambition for the project, and that's why I wanted especially to hear from you about what is Alphabet's ambition for monetizing the data that comes from this neighborhood.
Well, I think, and I'll turn it over to Elisa and Christina, since they are leading the work on privacy, but there's a commitment that Elisa pointed out, which is we're not interested in selling personal information through this product, or I mean through this project rather. The ambition is actually to use data to improve urban life. And so my title is Head of Urban Systems. If you're going to manage the traffic system, you're going to manage the transit system, you need better information, right? That doesn't have to be personally identifiable information. And I think a lot of what we are trained over the last decade to focus on are advertising-driven business models. Now, Alphabet's done very well on that. I think net, they've provided a great service to the world. There are obviously examples that have gone farther and perhaps too far in terms of that. But in an urban place, if the objective is targeted advertising as a significant source of revenue, that's just not going to work. We need to create a place that people want to come to live, to work, and to visit. And in some ways, that's actually about reducing advertising as much as it is increasing it. But I do think it's really important for us not to lose sight of the fact that information is one of the ways we manage dense urban areas. And I'd say that if we can use information better, that is a great thing, just like the information you get on real-time transit or the information that allows the city government to keep track of building permits or all sorts of things that keep us safer, that make our systems work better. And we can't lose sight of that side of the data equation. Not all data is personally identifiable.
And the last thing I'd say is, in terms of our ambition is to do all of the things that Rit said without impairing individual rights and without having improper use of any data that's happening in that district.
So, in the interest of time, thank you. If you had a question and we didn't get around to you, please make sure you tell it to people in the blue shirts so we can get it, maybe respond, maybe just take it in as a comment. Thank you all for missing the first half of the Raptors game. I don't know. I was hoping someone would yell out who was winning. And thank you so much for coming. Go to the back, but not all of you, because there's not enough space. Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure.